Okay, in this final part, it's part 10, we're going to go ahead and take your finished animation and go ahead and render it. Now a couple things you need to know, most of them are technical settings that we'll get to in a moment, is that remember that the render is the only true way that you can actually view your animation. It can be played in a web browser, it can be played in QuickTime Player, other video players or media players like VLC. We've got a whole bunch on the school computers. Any change that you need to make, you'll need to then go back to Blender, make those changes, and then re-render it again to be able to see them. Okay? Alright, so let's assume that you think this is your best effort. You're going to come over here on the far right hand side. You're going to come to the render panel. That's the first one here that looks like a little camera. We're going to start off in the top category here. So right here where it says render, we will be clicking on this animation button in a little bit. That'll be the final button that will start the rendering process. Let's go down here to dimensions. So under dimensions, this is where you actually choose how big is the render going to be. Right now you'll see that the resolution is set here for the X and the Y axis. These numbers are the default for Blender, and at the very bottom here you'll see a little percentage slider. So right now it will do 50% of these two numbers right here. So if you want to see what they look like, what you could do is you can just come up here and click on the render button, and that will show you this is 50% of 1920 pixels on the x-axis and 1080 pixels on the y-axis. If I go ahead and set this to say 25% and hit render, you'll see that it renders in a quarter of that size. And if I go ahead and bump it up to 100%, you'll see there you go. It's now nice and bigger. It's not really any better quality, it's just bigger. Something else you should know is that the bigger this multiplier is, the slower or the faster it will go. So for the first render, I recommend that you set it to a very small amount, something like 25%, and that's what I'm going to do. And that way we have speed on our side. So I'm going to go ahead and click inside here, type in 25% and hit return. You want to make sure over here to the right where it says frame range, you want to make sure that your start frame is set to 1 and your end frame is set to whatever your last frame in your animation is. Down below that, frame rate, that should be set to 24, and that's fine. So you're at 24 frames per second. Okay, so that's okay there. Let's see. Next, you want to go to a category called output. So under output, this box right here says TMP, which means a temporary folder. You don't want to save your animation to a temporary folder, otherwise it'll be gone after a certain amount of time. So come down here, and where it says output and there's this box, you're going to click on this little icon on the right. It's a little folder, and it's going to ask you where do you want to save your movie. So I'm going to go to my desktop. I'm going to go to my Project XYZ folder, and I'm going to place it inside my project folder. And now I'm going to give it a name. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom in here, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to call this render. I'm just going to call this let's call this test render 1. Okay, now it might be perfect, but I don't know that yet, so this is my test. And I'm going to say accept. Okay, now the only other thing I need to do now is choose what format is the file going to be. Right now it's set to a PNG file, which means it's set up to PNG files. Now let me give you a warning here. If I click on animation, what's going to happen is on my desktop I'm going to get all 966 frames of my animation. I'm going to go ahead and do that in this demo so you can see how bad this is, and then I'll cancel it out. So here we go. I've told it to save them as test render 1 as PNG files. That's individual. That means every frame will be rendered. And I'm going to hit animation. And you'll see, oops, it's not on my desktop. It's inside here. So here are all of my frames that are being made. I'm going to go ahead and stop it. I'm going to stop it from rendering. And now look inside my project folder. You'll see here's test render 1, here's frame 1, frame 2, frame 3, frame 4, and you can see the X is starting to go across the screen. So I'm going to now delete these. So if I had let this finish, it only got through 102 frames. But if I had let that finish, it would actually have rendered out all 966 frames, which is a huge pain. I've also made the mistake where you accidentally save it to your desktop and you end up with 966 icons on your desktop, which is a huge nightmare. So we don't want it to be a ping file. So I'm going to click right here and this pop-up is going to come up. So these are all images on the left. These are movies on the right. I'm going to choose QuickTime on the right. And that's really all you need to do. Later on in the year, we'll do some more advanced settings that are higher quality, but for right now, this is okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and hit animation, and you'll see because my output resolution was set to 25%, I can actually watch it render here, and that's incredibly helpful. So what it's doing is it's rendering what it calls tiles, and that's these little boxes that you see here. I'm going to zoom in here. And it's going so fast, it's not real time, but it's going so fast that I can actually catch any issues. Now if I notice a major issue like my Z isn't animating, I can press the escape key and I can change it. I can make the change and then I can re-render. But you can see mine's going along pretty well, it looks like. And then when it's done, I'm going to go ahead and stop the video, and when it's done, I'll end up with a finished movie. Okay, so I'm back, and I'm going to go look inside my project folder, and here is my rendered movie. So you can see that what Blender does is it put in the name that I called it. I called it Test Render 1, but then it also puts in the frame range, which is fine. I'm not crazy about that. I don't know why, it's personal preference. So I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of those. But once you have your rendered movie or your test, you can go ahead and open it up, and you'll see that it's itty bitty. Again, I made it 25%, but if you press play, you'll see it goes ahead, it plays in real time. So there's everything moving in real time, all your lighting, all your effects, etc. And there it is. Now you notice that it's quite grainy. In video, that's called noise. So there's a high amount of noise here. We're not worried about that right now. But here it is, and it's playing, and everything looks pretty good. I'm okay with it. Now, let's say you notice that something was off. What would you do? Well, you'd come back, like I said earlier, you'd come back into Blender, and you'd go ahead and make your changes, save, and then you'd come back over here and you would re-render. You could even give it another name. So I could come back over here to the icon. I could say, all right, I'm going to go ahead and do test render number 2. Accept, and you would re-render it. Only when you get a really good render should you then change your multiplier here from 25% and then go up to 50%. 50% is what I'm asking for the final render. Okay? So when you're 100% sure that everything looks good, change your multiplier here up to 50%, go ahead and save, and you'll be good to go. All right? Good luck.